beneficiary designations, and how they can be an important part of estate planning. This is estate planning lawyer Michael Pevney, and I create estate plans for families in the state of California. Now, life insurance, retirement accounts, bank accounts, traditional investment accounts, all of these different type of financial instruments often have to them beneficiary designations. Sometimes with life insurance, we call it a beneficiary. Sometimes with a checking or a savings account, we call it a TOD, transfer on death, or POD, payable on death beneficiaries. Now, having a beneficiary for these types of accounts can be very beneficial. One of the reasons it's very beneficial is that it avoids probate. Probate is the system of government court hearings in your state that your estate, the property that you leave behind, would have to go to if you pass away without an estate plan, or even with a will but without a trust. However, we need to be careful when it comes to beneficiary designations, because beneficiary designations, even if you have a trust and even if you have a will, the beneficiary designation rules the day. That means it supersedes, it trumps, it prioritizes, it comes first over what a trust or a will says. And there can be kind of some horror stories behind this sort of thing. Sometimes we have somebody who has their ex-spouse. Maybe they got divorced and they're now a single parent, and their ex-spouse is the beneficiary of their 401k. That person now passes away, and if the ex-spouse is still the beneficiary, they're going to get that 401k, even if they have a will that says, I want all of my property to go to my kids, and I want all of my, or a trust that says, I want everything I own kept in trust for my kids until they reach a specific age, which is why it can be very important to update those beneficiaries. A lot of times, the main document that I create for people is a trust, a revocable living trust, which is a legal entity that you have complete control over while you're alive, and it can live on after you've passed away to make sure that beneficiaries inherit things in a responsible way. So one way to use beneficiary designations as a part of estate planning is sometimes making the trust a beneficiary of certain financial instruments, like an investment account or a brokerage account or a retirement account in some circumstances, and oftentimes life insurance. This is really important if we have kids that are under the age of 18 and we want them to be cared for responsibly. And beneficiary designations, oftentimes, depending on the institution, we can usually have a primary beneficiary and then a secondary or alternate beneficiary. So sometimes when it comes to things like life insurance, or maybe a large investment account, or maybe a 401k, I will have somebody, if they're married and they have kids, I will sometimes have the spouse be the primary beneficiary, or first beneficiary, meaning if they pass away, it immediately goes to that spouse. But if the spouse has passed away, we'll have the trust be the alternate or secondary beneficiary. And that means that it will pass, that money, that account will pass without having to go through the probate process into that trust. And once it's into the trust, it has to follow the rules of that trust, meaning that maybe we want things distributed to kids in a responsible way. Maybe we don't want them to have access to the entire amount of that money until they reach a certain age or reach a certain milestone, or we want to make sure they have a degree, or we want to make sure that they're not abusing substances or have a gambling problem or are undergoing a lawsuit or a bankruptcy or a messy divorce. And making the trust a beneficiary and having these things distributed by way of trust instead of directly to children can help them and aid them from that, and make sure that money doesn't go right out the door to a creditor, to a bankruptcy judgment, or to somebody who is suing them, or if those kids are making bad decisions. But it's always important to remember that whoever that beneficiary is on that account is going to trump whatever the trust or a will says. So even if the will says, I want to leave everything to my Aunt Mary, but the beneficiary on it is, again, maybe you want to cut your kids out, or maybe you don't want your kids to be the beneficiary of that account. It's going to go to whoever the beneficiary is. So beneficiary designations are important. They can also be utilized in certain circumstances where maybe we're in a blended family and we want things to go to our current spouse, but maybe we have kids from a prior relationship and we want to leave those adult children from a prior relationship some money when you pass away, not when your current spouse passes away. And sometimes we can make the kids a beneficiary of certain financial accounts or maybe a life insurance policy, that sort of thing. And that is how beneficiary designations rule the day, and how sometimes we might want to make a trust a beneficiary of certain financial accounts. If you have any questions about this or anything else related to estate planning, you can set up a time to meet with me for free if you live in California, and we can talk about estate planning. If this is interesting to you, please upvote it and subscribe to this channel. And thank you for your time, and thanks for your attention.